Hey everybody, what is happening? Good to see all of you here. We got a good turnout so far tonight. You guys are hanging out. Let me know that you can hear me in the chat room. That would be really, really good. I want to thank everyone for coming back for part 2 of our live mixing demonstration series, if you will. Part 1, we talked about and looked at it very closely at tape machines and looked at the virtual tape machine by Slate Digital in particular. Tonight, we're going to follow it up with some console emulation, talk about how that works, why you'd want to use it, demonstrate how it sounds on both individual tracks as well as maybe just on buses. And then we'll do a bunch of questions and answers. So I hope everybody had a great holiday. Before we get started, as you can see, scroll along the bottom of the screen. This weekend, tomorrow is the last day that the Black Friday sale's on for all the training courses at Home Recording Made Easy. Use BLACK50 at checkout. That will take 50% off any one of the training courses. We're talking a lot about consoles tonight. We talked about tape machines. One course you may want to really check out is mixing with analog style plugins, where we go, or I go, far deeper than what we're doing here on YouTube. But that course will kind of tie into what we've been talking about over the last couple of weeks. You may want to consider that course, but everything is 50% off. Tomorrow is the last day. If this is your first time here, first live stream at Home Recording Made Easy, let us know in the chat. And if it's your first time, welcome to the family. I appreciate you being here. I think you'll get a lot out of tonight and you'll learn something, hopefully. And that's always very, very cool. And if you're new, make sure, look to the side of the screen here. We want to make sure you're subscribed to YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, blah, 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 blah. Subscribe to all that stuff because I'm always posting new content that isn't always on YouTube. And then last but certainly not least, if you like anything that you see here tonight, or if you've learned something and you found this informative and helpful to you, feel free to use the super chat. It is greatly appreciated. So let's head on over into the chat room and see who is here and then say hello. And then we'll jump in and we'll start looking at console emulation. How about that? So let's get over to the chat. Let's see who is here tonight. It's got a lot of folks here already, which is fantastic. For everybody that's here, we should have a thumbs up from all of you tonight. That would be awesome. So we have David S.J.'s here. Dave, how you doing, buddy? Tom is here. Hey, Tom. Let's see. Mark is here. Hey, Mark, how are you doing? Tom Warnick is here. How you doing? Good to see you. DJ is here. Hey, DJ, what's going on, buddy? Let's see. Randall's here. Hey, Randall, how you doing? Who else? Jim is here. Hey, Jim. Ian's here. How you doing, Ian? Good to see you. Let's see. Who else is here? Mark is here. How you doing, Mark? Tom Kaplan, Ian, okay. Let's see who else is here. Everyone say hi. We should have a bunch of people saying hello in the chat. Alistair's here. Hey, Alistair, how are you? Shoel is here. How you doing? Alberto's here. Alberto, how are you? Brian Hall is here. Brian, how are you? Good to see you as well. Johnny Lipsham's here. Hey, Johnny, how are you, buddy? Hope you're doing well. Hope the family's well. Hope you're doing well. We need to catch up soon on Skype. It's been a long time. Kennesi Williams is here. How you doing? And Juan is here. Hey, really, really cool. You got a nice pint of Guinness online. Okay, cool, man. So we got 37 people here already. That's wonderful. So, like I said, if you're new here, let us know that you're new. If you have any questions, we will do a Q&A session after this, as we always do, and I'll answer any questions. Dave's putting a bunch of links in the chat room. Remember, Sweetwater is also running a lot of Black Friday deals, up to 70% off on a lot of their stuff. Dave's got the affiliate link in the chat. If you guys don't mind using that, that helps me. You don't pay any extra money, but I do get a small commission, and it is greatly appreciated. And as a matter of fact, take that link, copy it, and paste it onto your desktop or into one of your note apps, or keep it on your computer, because that link is good 12 months out of the year. You can go shopping anytime, and anytime you use that link, it helps me, and I do appreciate it, and I say thank you in advance. And I know a lot of you have gone out and bought some new gear for your studio through Sweetwater. You've emailed me a bunch of details, and congratulations on all of that stuff. And if you have any questions about a particular piece of gear that you're looking at Sweetwater and you're not sure what to do, you can always hit me up with an email on the website and say, hey, Dave, I'm looking at A, B, or C. What do you kind of recommend? What do you know? And I'll give you my honest opinion. So I do that for people all the time, so feel free to do that. Cool. Let's jump over into Studio One, shall we? And let's talk. There we go. Let's talk about console emulation. So again, if you missed, let me get my cans on. A couple of things. If you missed, just the other night, 2 nights ago, we did the plugin 2020 wrap up. Was a lot of fun. Ton of people showed up. We had a great time. That video is on YouTube in the archive. You can check that out, where I took you through all the plugins that I acquired in 2020 and talked to you about the winners, the losers, which ones I recommend. And I did that for a reason, because this weekend is when all these plugin companies have things on sale. And if you want to pick some stuff out, I gave you some recommendations of things you may want to check out. Most of those plugins that we talked about, almost all of them, you can not only get on the manufacturer's website, but you can also get them at Sweetwater for the same price. So when you go watch that video, in the description box, I have now put timestamps. So you don't have to watch all 2 hours if you want to skip around and check out the certain plugin manufacturers that you might be interested in. You will see that in the description box. Although, hey, if you got nothing to do tomorrow afternoon, watch all 2 hours. I think you'll get a lot out of it. But if you want to see a specific plugin that I discussed, or a specific brand of plugins, you can just click the timestamp and do that. Okay, so that is up in YouTube, so you guys can do it. You guys could check that out. So the week before we talked, pardon me, we started off this mix and we talked about tape machines, and we talked about the signal flow of an analog studio, and we looked and took a deep dive into this particular plugin right here. And I encourage you to go back and watch part 1, where I showed you all the settings, explained to you what all the settings did or do, and then let me adjust my headphones here, and then we went ahead and we listened to it on all our tracks. Okay, so that's the first plugin in the chain, and the reason why it's the first plugin in the chain is because that's kind of how an analog studio signal flow kind of runs, and we trying to emulate that, right? So we're going from the live floor. People are playing instruments, strumming their guitars, singing, playing drums. Microphones are going into the control room, hitting a multi-track tape machine. From there, it's going to the input of a console, and that's what we're going to look at tonight. And then from there, it goes out the console on the bus, right? The mix bus of the console, the output. And then it'll go through a channel strip as well, and then it'll go to a 2-track mastering tape machine. So tonight we're going to look at the console emulation, and the one we're going to look at is the VCC by Slate Digital. There are others, and maybe if we do another series after this one is done, where we'll look at a different set of plugins, I'll show you some other ones. But this one is probably the more popular one, and quite honestly, probably my favorite of all the console emulation plugins. I use this all the time on every single mix that I do. And it's a great, wonderful plugin. It's simple to use. It's part of the Slate All Access. If you have the All Access Pass, you'll get this as part of your collection. And I see some people talking about it tonight. Hey, Robbie, thank you so much for the super chat. I really appreciate that. I wanted to make sure I caught that. Thank you so much. It's very generous of you. If you have the All Access Pass, you have this. And what's great about the All Access Pass for Slate Digital is they also, any new plugins that come out, you don't pay any extra for. It's part of your membership package. So, for example, they just released a version of the LA2A. They just released a plugin called Fresh Air, which came out today. I've installed them. I haven't played with them yet, but those are free plugins, and they're probably really good plugins, and there will be demos on those on the YouTube channel. Bang for buck, I still think Slate Digital has the best all-around package that's out there. So this is the Virtual Console Collection. So now, the second plugin in our chain, it goes across all of our tracks. This is really a 2-piece plugin, if you will. You'll see here we have in black here, this is just an input, just a trim control. You can disregard that. The virtual channel here, which is the one that's in black. And then also the second part of the plugin is actually the mix bus part. Okay, so let me just move this over here, which this goes on your buses and your master bus. So you can see over here, we have the virtual mix bus. Okay, so on the buses, you put the virtual mix bus. On the individual channels, you would put the virtual channel because they model 2 different things. The virtual channel is really modeling kind of the input stage of the 6 different consoles that we're going to talk about tonight. And the mix bus portion of the plugin is modeling the output bus of it. Okay, so it's modeled a little different. They have a little bit different tonality to them, and they sound a little bit different. So the way you would set this up, if you don't know, is let's start with the master bus. It's the first plugin in the master bus. Remember I said the tape machine is the last plugin in the chain on the master bus, but on the individual tracks, it's the first plugin, okay? On the master bus, the first plugin that I hit is the virtual console, and we use the mix bus. So let's walk through this and let me explain the controls, how they work, and talk to you a little bit about the 6 different consoles. Now, the virtual mix bus layout and the virtual channel that we just looked at is exactly the same. One's black, one's this gray color, okay? So the controls are exactly the same. Okay, so let's start at the bottom here. So at the bottom, everybody with me? Vocals are okay here. You can hear everything good. Hopefully, I got 52 people here. That's wonderful. Okay, so this is an easy plugin to use. This is what I really love about it. You have noise reduction down here. By clicking in noise reduction, that's going to eliminate any of the noise flow, any of the hiss that you would typically get in a piece of analog gear. You can, if you don't want that because you have this plugin on a bunch of tracks across your session, if you don't want that desirable hiss or that noise floor, you could get rid of it by using the noise reduction. Typically, I never turn this on. I almost always want the noise because it's very, very subtle, yeah. And that is part of the vibe of these kinds of plugins. But if you didn't want the noise, you can always click that in. We have our group bypass button, which I'll talk about in a minute. Okay, that ties into this group knob here. So we have 8 different groups that we can do here. So the way I would typically use this, and what's really handy about the grouping here, is that you can, for example, I will set everything to group 1, and not only is this particular instance that we're looking at, whatever settings I have, whatever console I choose, however much I use the drive control, which we'll talk about in a second, will be the same on if I were to put this on group 1, and then let's say on the kick track here, I put that on group 1. Anytime I make any changes to one, it's automatically going to make it to the other. So let me just demonstrate that for you so you can see that. This is a very, very handy thing. So let me spread these out across the screen. So on the right here, if I take the master bus and I turn the drive knob, look what happens over on this one over here, right? It turns down. Why? Because they're both assigned to group 1. If I change the console, it's going to change the console on all of them as well. Why is that practical? Because this is a great way, and we're going to do this tonight, where if we group everything to one group, and I want to listen to the differences between the 6 different consoles, at the touch of a button, we can do that. We don't have to go into every one of the instances across all the tracks and manually switch them. Make sense? That's a pretty popular thing. Many plugins do it. But this is really a great way to get a kind of an A-B comparison. Or if you want to listen to a certain console with no drive added, or maybe maximum drive or anywhere in between, again, you switch one, it switches it on the other. Okay, so that's what the grouping function does. If you hit the group bypass button, you will see it'll turn off not only the instance that we're looking at, but whatever else is assigned to that group. So once again, this is a good way to do a complete turn on and turn off, one click of a button on one plugin window, and it will turn off every instance that is assigned to that group. So the way I typically use this is I will assign everything to group 1 across my entire mix. So I can turn off all the VCCs with one click, or I can change the console, or I can change the amount of drive going into one of the consoles so I could hear the difference very quickly A/B. Now, another way that you can do this, some people would, I don't do it this way, but this is another way you could think about it, is you have 8 groups. So let's say you want all your drums to go through one type of console, and then you want all your guitars to go through another type of console. Well, you can do that by setting the group. So let's say all your drums on your virtual channel could be on group 1, and then all your guitars could be, let's say, on group 2, and you can have totally different consoles. So you can mix and match and come up with your own unique sound. That's not the way I typically use it. I try to emulate, if we were working on an API console, everything is going through an API console, or on a Neve or on an SSL. Make sense? But you can mix and match. That's the beauty of being in the digital world. You don't have to decide what studio you're going to go to and what desk you're going to work on. You can work on one of 6 different desks here, or you can work on all 6 at the same time if you want to group them differently, whatever you want to do. But that's what the grouping button does. Okay, in the center here, we have our 6 different consoles. So let me talk to you about which these are. So the first one here, all the way counterclockwise, is the Brit 4KE. That is a model of an SSL desk from the 1980s, an E-series console. some of the characteristics of this particular console. It has a very tight and punchy low end and a warm low mid kind of a deal. Okay, so it's going to have real tight, real punchy in the low end and nice warm kind of rounded out low mids. That's kind of the sound characteristic of the Brit 4KE that they modeled. Next to that, if we click one up, we're at the Brit 4KG. Again, it's another SSL. It's a G series console. Okay, the Brit 4K G is going to have a more clean sound to it. It's going to be it's going to be punchy as well, but it's going to have a little bit more of a wider sound, if you will. And again, I'm going to demo all of these. You're going to hear the differences, just telling you what they do. So this sound characteristic sounds way different from the E series, and we're going to hear that. This is not going to be as gritty, the G series. It's going to be a little more clean. It's still going to have that punchiness, that SSL vibiness to it, but it's going to have a little bit wider sound stage, if that makes sense. Okay. Next console is the USA. That is an API console. APIs are world famous USA consoles. Those are going to have a real thick low end, and it's going to have a lot of mids to it. A lot of mid-range punch that doesn't get really honky or harsh, which is one of the reasons API is known for that mid-range, that mid-range characteristic that sounds so desirable, which is one of the reasons why when you record heavy distorted guitars and things that are very mid-range heavy, people in the analog world, APIs are kind of known for that. API preamps, API consoles, because they have that sound. They sound wonderful on hard rock and metal with big guitars, wall of sound guitars, many distorted guitar tracks. API is a wonderful choice for something like that because of the mid-range push in it, okay? Next console number 4 is a Brit N. That's a Neve console. Neve is going to just have all around fat, upper end's going to open up, going to sound very smooth, going to have a little bit of grit. It's the sound of rock and roll. To me, out of all 6 of these, the Brit N is one of my favorites. And then secondary would be the Brit 4KE is another one of my favorites. Those are the ones that I tend to like more than others, although I've used them all and they all sound great. Okay, so Neve is going to have that Neve thing. Okay, that everybody, Neve is Neve, right? It just sounds amazing. It's the sound of rock and roll. Next to that, you have this funny little symbol. That funny little symbol, I believe, is a Trident console. A Trident console is going to have a smooth top end to it. It's not going to be as aggressive as something like a Neve. A little bit more smooth in the top, but it's going to sound wide. It's got a bigger, wider sound stage. Okay, Tridents are known for boosting high-end stuff, and high-end's always very smooth. Same thing with API as well. But Trident and API, to me, are a little more in the same family, if you will, where SSL and Neve kind of live in another family. Different, but in the same neighborhood, if you will. And then lastly, we have the RC Tube. And the RC Tube is a 50s console, probably, I believe, from Abbey Road. That's all tube from the 1950s. The thing about an all tube console or any of the Abbey Road plugins, we've looked at a bunch of them in the past here on this channel, as well as mixingmadeeasy.net. If you want to be a member there, Dave, I'm sure will be popping up links in the chats. But anyway, I've done several mixes with Abbey Road stuff, the old 50s emulation plugins. And the thing about those kinds of plugins, they have such a unique sound, which is so different from any of these other things. It tends to be nice and fat and warm. It doesn't have an open top end. It's a lot more of a warm, thick sound. Okay, when I hear the RC Tube, it pairs very nicely with things like the Waves Red console channel strips or the TG12345 channel strip by Waves. It pairs very nicely with that because it's modeled around that same era of equipment. Okay, so we have 6 very different sounding consoles here. They all have their own flavor, and we'll listen to those flavors in a few minutes. Above that, we have our input and our output. The input's going to drive more signal into the plugin, and then you can compensate by turning down the output. You can link the inputs and outputs here. When I turn one up, the other one turns down, which is what I typically do. You can also group the IOs, which I don't typically do. So just like we talked about the groups, if I group right now, the grouping only works with the drive and the console. It doesn't work with the input and the output. The input and output is separate from this big group knob down here that we talked about a few minutes ago, unless you click this group IO button. And now when I group them and turn them on, if I have them all lit up, I believe when I turn one, yeah, you can see as I'm turning one here, it's also turning on both plugins because I have the group IO on. I don't typically use that because I want to be able to control on each instance of the plugin, which we're going to do in a minute, how much signal I'm hitting, because it all depends on the recorded track. Make sense? And that is the plugin. It's that simple to use. So what I want to do, and what I want to show you what we've done, is we put this on the master bus. I've also put an instance of this across all of our tracks, as well as our buses. And I'm going to keep the buses off, and I'm going to talk to you about the buses in a bit. We're just going to focus on the tracks themselves, okay? So I'm going to turn them all on now. Now what I'm going to do, last week we had the tape machines, and I'm going to turn off all the tape machines for now, just so we can just hear what the virtual console is doing, and then after I'll turn the tape machines on so you can hear the accumulative effect. Again, remember we talked last week about this is really in stages. This is not one plugin gets you the whole sound. Getting the analog sound, getting that old analog vibe has to do with many stages of this. And each week we're talking about a different stage. Last week was stage 1. This is stage 2. So let's just start with our kick drum. Let's solo up our kick drum here. And let me show you how I dial this in. It's very similar to the tape machine. You let me know in the chat if the volume is going to be good or not good or whatever for Studio One. It should be the same as last week, but I'll try to turn it up a little. And if it's a little too hot, let me know and I'll turn it down. So here's our kick drum. Okay. So just like last week, what I'm going to do is I'm going to set everything to group 1. So everything will be on group 1. I'm going to link our inputs and outputs. And what I want to do is I want to hit right around 0 dB on this plugin. That's kind of the sweet spot, just like it is on the tape machine. All the Slate plugins, the calibration of this and where it is at its most optimum is going to be around 0 dB. That doesn't mean you can't hit it harder to get some distortion like we talked about with tape, and we'll demonstrate that in a bit, but just so you know. So basically I'll turn up my input, and if it clips a little bit on the heaviest hits, I'm not so worried about it. We'll start with the Brit 4KE. We'll start with one console. We'll go through all of them as we work through this. Now the drive knob, for now, we're going to just keep it at 12 o'clock, right up the middle. We'll play with that adjustment after. So basically, I'm on group 1. I'm using the first Brit 4KE, okay? And then we're going to go ahead and we're just going to hit right around 0 dB on the kick. We're going to do the same thing on the snare. Okay, group 1, we're going to link our IO. We can hit this a little harder. Okay. Again, and if he's got some heavy hits and it goes into the red a little bit and it clips a little, not too worried about it. Okay, toms, he doesn't hit the toms much in this song, as I said last week. There is one right there. Okay, should probably turn that down a little. And I'll group the IO. Let me go back to that tom roll here. Good enough. He hits the toms, I think, 3 times in the whole song. Overheads. Okay, we're going to link the inputs and outputs. Turn this down a little bit. Okay, percussion. We're going to move through all the tracks pretty quickly, and then we're going to demonstrate all the different consoles. So this is how I will typically set these up. Bass. Acoustic guitar. guitar. Piano. Now also keep in mind all the tape machines before this plugin are turned off, right? And I'm setting up the gain staging for this plugin with the tape machine off, which is not really the way to do this. When we turn the tape machines back on, I may have to come back in here and tweak the inputs and the outputs, but I really just want you to get a feel for what this does on its own, okay? So just keep that in mind. Okay, let's go to our lead vocal.
Away from you, and I'll be fine. Cleaning up the corner, put it back in order. You know I will always have this too. A little piece of you.
Got our background vocals.
I'm alright as I pick up the pieces that are left of me. I'm alright. Feel away from you. I'll be fine. Cleaning up the corner, put it back in order. You know I will always have this too. A little piece of you.
Okay, so now once I've set it up across all the individual tracks, I want to check the master bus and just see how we're doing here. Now remember, after the virtual console collection on the individual tracks, next week, we're going to look at channel strips, and we're going to have some additional things that will change the gain structure of it hitting the master bus. But for tonight's demonstration, I just want to check that out. And we're not bad right now. Okay, so once I've set that up, now let me demonstrate for you the 6 different consoles here and what it does. Now remember, everything is set to group 1. So what does that mean? That means if I change from one console to the other, it's changing it across all the tracks, right? But the first thing I want to do is I just want to bypass it. I want you to hear the difference between bypass it, you know, from turning them all on, turning them all off, just so you can hear the difference. And just so, for the non-believers, I'll bring up another instance of the plugin on the kick drum so you can see when I bypass it, it will bypass the one on the left. If I were to change the console, it will change, okay? So keep your eye on the bypass button. We're going to start with it on, and I'll just turn it on, and off, and so you can hear the difference on the Brit 4KE desk.
I know the seasons right to change. It's changing all around. I know the reasons you've arranged. You're tearing me down. Where is the peacefulness of mine? Where will my heart come back to life?
Okay, so you hear the difference is turning on, turning it off. And again, I don't know how it always comes across on YouTube, but there is a big difference between on and off. And if you've gain staged each one of these properly with the inputs and the outputs being linked, when you bypass all the plugins, the on and off state or the enable and bypass state from a volume perspective ought to be very close to the same. And they are. And I did this very quickly. If I tweaked it in a little more, the volume would be exactly the same. It's very close. It's close enough for this demonstration. So you're not hearing something that's getting way louder and your ears are, you know, tricking your brain to thinking, well, louder sounds better. But I want you to listen to the snare. I want you to listen to the bass guitar on this. I want you to listen to the vocal, how everything opens up just by running signal through this one plugin. Okay, so let's try that again.
I'm alright as I pick up the pieces that are left of me. I'm alright. Feel away from you.
It's very narrow.
And I'll be fine. Cleaning up the corner, put it back in order. You know I will always have this too. A little piece of you.
So you'll hear a width, and this is not even the console that is known for being very wide, but you can instantly hear more presence, but you also hear a sense of width and a sense of depth, right? Things seem like they get a little bit wider and a little bit thicker, a little bit deeper just by running signal through it, okay? That's the magic of running something through a piece of an analog console in this case. And we're only looking at the console where it's really just the input stage that's being modeled here. We're not talking about the EQ section, the compressor section, or any of that on a console. That's next week. This is just the input stage, right? Okay, so now that we've done that, I want to cycle through now, and I'm going to go from the E to the G series. So I'm just going to turn this knob, and you're going to see that both instances of the plugin are going to change. So we can hear the differences between the two consoles, just so you can hear what is the difference between a Brit 4K-E and a Brit 4K-G. Now they're going to be similar in sound because they're both SSLs, okay? But here we go.
I know the season's right to change. It's changing all around. I know the reasons you've arranged. You're tearing me down. Where does the peacefulness of mine? Where will my heart come back to life?
Okay, so what I hear here and what I want you to focus in on is just focus in on the low end. Focus on the thump of the kick drum. Narrow your listening focus. The Brit 4KE has a tighter low end. It's a little bit more rounded off, a little less transient on the 4KG. It's a little warmer sounding, for lack of a better word.
I'm alright as I pick up the pieces that are left of me. I'm alright, feel away from you, and I'll be fine. Cleaning up the corner, put it back in order. I know I will always have this too, a little piece of you.
Okay, and the Brit 4KE tends to be has a little bit more clarity in the upper mids, okay? So it's a different vibe altogether. Same SSL thing, but it's different. The tonality is different. You can absolutely hear the EQ shift, okay? Everybody hear that? Everybody with me? So far, so good? We cool? All right, now let's go over to the API, and let's cycle between the 4K. I'll try to cycle between the three just so you can hear the difference. But let's just go from one SSL to an API and let's hear the difference there.
I know the season's right to change. It's changing all around. I know the reasons you've arranged. You're tearing me down. Where does the peacefulness of mine? Where will my heart come back to life? I'm alright as I pick up the pieces that are left of me. I'm alright, feel away from you, and I'll be fine. Cleaning up the corner, put it back in order. I know I will always have this too, a little piece of you.
Okay, so the USA or the API sounds a little bit more tonality-wise similar to the G series as opposed to the E series. Again, the API also tends to have a little bit more pronounced mid-range, which is one of the sound characteristics of an API console. And again, a lot of it has to depend on the program material. As I said earlier, this is not a song that has big, heavy wall of sound distorted guitars. This is more of a mellow pop track, right? So those mids, this is not going to be as pronounced as it would be in a different style of music. But there's definitely a shift in the EQ, okay? So let's go over to the Brit N now, which is the Neve style. Let's see what we have there. And I'll cycle through them all.
I know the season's right to change. It's changing all around. I know the reasons you've arranged. You're tearing me down. Where does the peacefulness of mine? Where will my heart come back to life? I'm alright as I pick up the pieces that are left of me. I'm alright, feel away from you, and I'll be fine. Cleaning up the corner, put it back in order. I know I will always have this too, a little
Okay, so the Brit 4 and the Brit N, the Neve, to me, that has, and it's one of my favorites here. It's just one that my ears are used to. It just has a really nice balance between nice, aggressive top end and thick low end. It's not overly hyped on either one. And it seems like the mid-range just kind of sits in the middle. It may even be a little scoop sounding to me, just a little. But it seems to be overall the most balanced to my ear. And again, your ear is going to tell you something different, and that's totally cool. It's all personal preference. They all sound fantastic, but depending on the style of music would depend on which one that you might pick. Okay, so let's move on to the Trident, and we'll cycle through and see how that sits in with the rest of these.
I know the season's about to change. It's changing all around. I know the reasons you've arranged. You're tearing me down. Where does the peacefulness of mine? Where will my heart come back to life? I'm alright as I pick up the pieces that are left of me. I'm alright. Feel away from you. I'll be fine, cleaning up the corner, put it back in order. I know I will always have this too, a little piece of you.
Okay, so there's the Trident. So now the Trident, what I hear there, what stands out to me is the percussion tracks and the shakers and the tambourines tend to seem like it sticks out a little bit more at the Trident. Something in that frequency range has a little bit of a hype to it. But again, sounds similar to me as maybe it's a little bit more in that Brit and family. Maybe it's more of a British style console, but again, very wonderful sounding. And now lastly, the RC tube, which is going to be the all tube broadcast, our model from a broadcast desk from the 1950s. So let's check out the RC tube.
I know the season's about to change. It's changing all around. I know the reasons you've arranged. You're tearing me down. Where does the peacefulness of mine? Where will my heart come back to life? I'm alright as I pick up the pieces that are left of me. I'm alright. Feel away from you. I'll be fine, cleaning up the corner, put it back in order. I know I will always have this too, a little piece of you.
Okay, so the RC tube sounds way different than the rest of them. Remember I said it's going to be more warm. It's not going to have that open top end as much. It's going to sound a little bit warmer or darker, but in a good way. It's going to have a more rounded feel to the bottom end. It's not going to have that sharp kick drum attack. It's going to be a little bit more pillowy. I think I coined that word a couple of weeks ago, right? Pillowy. It's going to be a little bit more pillowy sounding. And it's just going to have a different vibe. This RC tube, as I said earlier, pairs wonderfully with the Abbey Roads collection by Waves. Wonderfully. I use it all the time when I'm using either the TG12345 channel strip or the Red 57 or 17. This works really, really well. So as you can hear, and again, I'll play that section back and I'll just kind of turn things counterclockwise like this, just so you could hear it in succession from the RC tube all the way back. And we can really hear the different sounds between these 6 consoles.
I know the season's about to change. It's changing all around. I know the reasons you've arranged. You're tearing me down. Where does the peacefulness of mine? Where will my heart come back to life? I'm alright as I pick up the pieces that are left of me. I'm alright. Feel away from you. I'll be fine, cleaning up the corner, put it back in order. I know I will always have this too.
Okay, so you hear the difference between all 6. Hopefully that comes through on the chat well enough, or over YouTube, but not on the chat, over YouTube. Okay, so we have 6 different very distinct sounds. Now, how I decide which one I use from one mix to the next will really depend. A lot of it has to do with, well, what channel strip am I going to be mixing with? So if I'm going to mix with a Neve channel strip, I would pick the Neve console. And if I was going to mix with an SSL, I'd pick the SSL, or if I was mixing with an API, the API. You get it? So I match this to the channel strip. If I'm not using a channel strip, and let's say I'm just using a stock EQ and a compressor, or an 1176 compressor and some other EQ, then it really doesn't matter. Again, it's all personal preference. But with the way I typically mix and the way I'm kind of guiding this series along is it'll have everything to do with the next week's plugin that we're going to look at, which is the channel strip. Okay, so now that we've kind of done that, we've looked at this on all the tracks and on the master bus. One thing I want to do is maybe on a couple of individual tracks, I want to show you how the drive feature, how you can maybe use that on some specific tracks. Things like snare drum, where if we solo up a snare here. Now again, if you group and I change the drive on one, it's going to change them on all of it, right? I would have to ungroup the snare if I just wanted to do the snare specifically. But we're soloing up the snares. I want you to hear what it does. This is 100% drive. No drive. Gets a little louder because we're pushing more signal into it. Now this drive, or this input's going to push a little bit more volume, so you would compensate with the output. But this drive and what sound characteristic it adds to the audio is different from the input. The input's going to be more of a clean stage. This is going to be definitely going to be pushing some harmonic distortion and some color for sure, as well as a little bit of volume. Okay, so that's what you can use to tweak individual tracks if you wanted to. But again, if you group everything like we've done here, it's going to affect the entire mix. So let's see what happens when we just go from no drive to 100% and everything in between. How does it change all the instances of the plugin? And therefore, how does it make the audio sound? I don't know. Let's try. So this is no drive at all.
I know the seasons about to change. It's changing all around. I know the reasons you've arranged. They're tearing me down. Where is the peacefulness of mine? Where will my heart come back to life? I'm alright as I pick up the pieces that are left of me. I'm alright. Feel away from you.
Okay, so it's louder. So we would turn down the output to compensate. Now you also notice by me changing the drive, we're on what, the snare track? By pushing the drive, you see we're not hitting on the meter. It's not hitting anymore. What's going into the plugin on the meter is controlled by this input, not by the drive. Okay, so just keep that in mind. Okay, so the other thing you can do too, instead of messing around with the output knob, because you say, well, wait a minute, if I turn up the drive and I turn down the output, then it loses its relationship to the input. And I already set that at the beginning when I was gain staging it, yeah? So what I would do here in a case like this, if I wanted to be extreme with my drive, is I would use another one of these trimmer plugins after the virtual console. And I would do something like this. Maybe turn it down 3 dB.
And I'll be fine. Cleaning up the corner, put it back in order. I know I will always have it.
Listen to it on the snare. Because you would need to do this on every track, right? Now the volume is virtually the same, right? Because I lowered it about 3 dB on the trimmer tool. Oops, I want to remove it. Okay, so what I want you to listen for here, let me turn up the snare a little louder so you can all hear it, okay? Is that forget listen to the actual crack of the stick hitting the snare, that first transient. That's what I want you to focus your ears on with this drive, because that's really where it makes the impact. So with no drive, listen to the impact of the transient. Now when I go all the way up, turn this down a little more. It's almost like we added a transient designer or a transient shaper plugin to it to get some of the transients back, right? That's kind of what it acts like. Okay. Now I'm going extreme. I wouldn't typically drive at 18 dB like this, but I wanted to show you what the difference is. Now, again, because we have all our plugins grouped, this is doing it on the entire mix. So that means if you were going to push more than go past maybe noon, 1 o'clock on this dial, then you'd want to put a trimmer plug-in after every one of the virtual consoles on all the tracks and turn it down a little. So when you do the before and the after, the volume's about the same. Does that make sense, everybody? I hope so. Okay. That's typical. And again, I'm just showing you how to use it. Where I would typically leave this is somewhere in this ballpark. 12, 1 o'clock. That's about what I do. A little bit of drive because it's an accumulative effect thing. We're only listening to it on one track, but it's an accumulative effect. I'm not typically pushing everything 18 dB, but you can, okay? So it depends on the program material, depends on what you're kind of going for. Just make sure that if you're going to do that, that you have a way to level match the plugin. That's so important, I can't even begin to tell you, right? And we know we talk about that a lot here. So one more time, we will listen. Let me turn down the snare.
I know I will always have this too. A little piece of you.
So no drive. It's kind of where I usually set it.
Seasons about to change. It's changing all around. I know the reasons you've arranged. You're tearing me down. Where is the peacefulness of mine? Where will my heart come back to life?
Okay, so going from 0 to about the 12 o'clock position, you don't hear any volume shift, and that's kind of where I typically leave it. But it gets a little bit more aggressive sounding, right? You hear the snare poke through a little bit more. Things tend to, you can hear the EQ shift a little bit. And what we're really getting there is we're getting some harmonic distortion. We're getting all those non-linearities and all the emulation of what happens when you push audio signal through a piece of analog gear. In this particular case, a Neve preamp section. Okay, you're going to hit those transformers on the way into the desk, and you're going to get some of that little bit of grittiness, that little bit of drive, a little bit of color to the audio in a very subtle way. And on one track, it's not as much of a difference, but across whatever it is here, 13 tracks, it's a bigger difference. Everybody with me still? Okay, so you really got to level match everything to make sure. Okay, now let's talk a little bit about, well, before we get to the buses. Now this is, remember we said we just used the console. Now remember last week we used our tape machines. Now if I turn all our tape machines on, and again, I don't know, we're going to see. It's probably not going to be level matched very well because we had them all, we set up this plugin with this plugin turned off for tonight's demonstration. Typically you would set it up with this turned on. So let's see what the difference is when we bring in all the tape machines, how much louder it may get or quieter. I don't know. We're going to see.
I'm alright as I pick up the pieces that I've left in me. I'm alright, feel away from you, and I'll be fine. Cleaning up the corner, put it back in order.
Okay, so listen to how much of a difference that makes by bringing in the tape machine, right? It's not really any louder. It's a little off from a level matching point of view, but it's a lot closer than I thought it would be because we kind of gain staged it all backwards for tonight's demonstration. But listen to the low end bump, the thickness, listen to bass guitar kick, and listen to the vocals, and listen how everything just opens up a little bit more. Things get a little more smoother, a little bit more present just by adding tape. So let's turn off tape.
I know I will always have this too, a little piece of you.
Okay, I want you to listen to that guitar solo. There's a reason why I played that guitar solo. Listen to what happened. Listen to the guitar solo only with the tape off and the tape on, and listen to what that does. And then I'll backtrack and let me, when you hear it, when there's a difference, and there is a difference, why do you think that difference is? There's a pop quiz for people that were here last week and were paying attention to what tape does. Okay? This is important that you understand this conceptually, right? This whole mixing series is really more about the concepts and getting to you to understand how these plugins work so you can use them more effectively. Okay, so listen to this guitar solo without tape, and then I'm going to do it again with tape.
Little piece of you.
Did you hear the difference? So what did I hear? Well, you tell me. What did you guys hear? I'm not going to tell you the answer. What do you think this is? Huh? We're in school here today. Okay, listen again. Here's with it, and halfway through I'll turn it off.
You.
So what did we hear differently? Did we hear anything differently? If you didn't hear anything differently, that's okay, because I'm going to give you the answer in a second. And if you didn't hear anything differently, don't feel bad about that. Don't feel like you're crazy, and don't feel like, oh, I can never get this. I don't hear what he's talking about. None of us heard what I'm talking about when we first started. None of us. No one in this chat room or me or any of your favorite instructors on YouTube and or famous engineers. We all had to learn how to tune our ears. And part of the reason why I teach the way I do is I'm trying to get you to learn how to tune your ears. So when you hear the difference and you know why that thing is doing what it's doing, it really opens up a possibilities and going to make you a better mix engineer, especially if you use these kind of plugins. Got some answers in there. We got some compression. Okay, good answer. Compression and some saturation. Good answer. It adds character. That's true. Glue. Yeah. Goo. It adds goo. I think is that an official word now? Goo. I guess it does add goo, doesn't it? All those answers are right. It adds compression. And when it adds compression, you can even hear it. And if I solo it for you, you're going to hear something else. There's a lot of extra saturation there. It almost sounds like he turned up his distortion on his amperes or distortion pedal. And if you remember last week, why? Because see how much I'm pushing the input on this tape machine? That was last week's demonstration to show you what happens when you overpress tape. Let's back that off a little. That was for demonstration purposes last week. So now if I back that off a little bit. Okay, so it still opens up the top end, but it rounds off that little nastiness, the thing that could tend to be a little bit brittle with distorted electric guitars. Tape helps that. Okay, so remember when we talked last week, we said hitting tape hard is going to have that effect. We said there are 3 things I want you to think about when you think about tape. We talked about it last week. We talked about thinking of it as a compressor, thinking of it as an EQ, and thinking of it as a saturation plugin, because it is all 3 of those things. And the people that answered one of those 3 answers, you're all right. Same thing with console. Consoles, in and of itself, running analog audio through analog circuitry is going to add a little bit of compression. It's going to be more subtle than what you heard on a tape machine. But there's a level of compression that happens there. There's a level of saturation using the drive knob, and depending on the console that you pick, will also. Each one of those consoles, the emulation of them, some will have more or less saturation, and some will have a different EQ curve to it, right? We heard the EQ differences, right? So again, you think about a console emulation plugin as what? As a saturator, the drive knob, an EQ, what kind of console are you using? The EQ is different, and a compressor. So just like last week, it's the same 3 things. So when I think about this as kind of from a compression point of view. I consider this stage that we're at is stage 2. Stage 1 was the tape machine of compression. Stage 1 of compression. Stage 2 is the console. Next week will be stage 3 when we hit a channel strip and we actually use a compressor. And when you see how we dial in that compressor next week, you'll start to understand why we're already compressing the signal in 2 stages before we ever hit a compressor. And that's by design. Okay. So now that we've kind of looked at that on the individual channels, one of the questions that comes up somewhat frequently is that although this is very CPU friendly, I'll just let you know, again, I can show you my performance monitor on my computer here. We're running at 7% of CPU and we have 13, 14 instances of this thing turned on. Yes, I have a little more highly spec'd computer than maybe the average person, but if you have a computer that has 16 gigs of RAM with at least a quad-core processor, you will have no problem putting 20 or 30 instances of the VCC on your tracks. You'll be totally cool. But let's say you're not in that boat. And people have asked, well, can't you just put them on the buses instead of the individual tracks because my computer runs out of horsepower? Yes, you can do that. I usually put them on both, but let's turn off all the consoles on the tracks and let's just do it on the individual tracks. So I'm going to turn, on the buses. So we have a drum bus, a bass bus, a guitar bus, a keyboard bus, and a vocal bus. So I'll just play this audio back and I'll set this up quickly because you've already seen me set it up. You know how to use it now. Now again, it's on a bus. So we're using the mixed bus portion of the plugin, not the virtual channel. So let's dial this in a little bit, inputs and outputs, and let's just see how that sounds compared to having them on all the tracks. Is there a difference? I don't know. Let's find out. Let me set this up.
I know the seasons about to change. It's changing all around. I know the reasons you've arranged. You're tearing me down. Where is the peacefulness of mine? Where will my heart come back to life? I'm alright as I pick up the pieces that are left of me. I'm alright, feel away from you. I'll be fine, cleaning up the corner, put it back in order. I know I will always have this.
Oh, I have something routed wrong here with the, yeah, I have the vocals routed to the guitar bus. That's pretty stupid. Okay, let's do the vocal part again, shall we?
A little piece of you. I know the seasons about to change. It's changing all around.
Okay, so now we just have them on the buses, not on the individual tracks. Those are turned off. Let's listen to what happens when I just turn those on and off. Still on the master bus, but only now we only have 5 instances of the plugin, not 13. Let's hear what the differences are.
I know the seasons about to change. It's changing all around. I know the reasons you've arranged. You're tearing me down.
Okay, so still a sizable difference. Not as obvious as all the other ones together because we have less instances of it running, but there is still a difference. So when people ask me, is it okay to just put it on the buses because I can't put it on all my individual tracks? The answer is yes. You're better off doing that than not doing anything at all. How I like to set this up is I put them on both. And some people will say, well, geez, you really need to put them on both? You don't really need to do anything, but I like the extra color that it adds. So again, you know, part of this whole thing is there's no rules, right? So now if I add all of them and turn them all on and off, what do we get?
Where is the peacefulness of mine? Where will my heart come back to life? I'm alright as I pick up the pieces that are left of me. From you, and I'll be fine, cleaning up the corner.
Okay, so it just adds another layer of color to it. Okay, I also even sometimes add a tape machine plugin on the buses before the console, just like on the individual tracks. It kind of drifts a little bit away from what we're really trying to do here if you're trying to really emulate a real analog studio. But again, experiment with it. It depends on the track. To me, if you're doing things in a subtle way, which we are, right? We're not slamming anything. A little extra color is not going to hurt you, but you don't want to overdo it, right? You don't want to overcook the turkey. I like that for a Thanksgiving analogy, huh? On Thanksgiving. Okay. Want to be careful. Okay. Use your ears, but you could hear, hopefully, the difference that this thing makes. And when you add just 2 plugins, now I'm going to shut everything on and off, all the plugins. Where did we start when we first loaded up this song, and where are we now? Here's no plugins.
I know the season's about to change. It's changing all around. I know the reasons you've arranged. You're tearing me down. Where there's a peacefulness in mind, where will my heart come back to life?
Okay. So what a difference that makes. It's a little louder, certainly, because again, setting up the gain staging, we're doing it very quickly. This would be tweaked in a lot more, but it's not so much volume that we hear a difference in. It's more of the EQ shift. You're hearing things open up. You're hearing things become more present. It's perceived to be a little bit louder, and it is a little bit louder. It's not dialed in perfectly, but it's close enough so you get the idea. Okay. So we took raw tracks, and before we added a single official compressor or a single official EQ or a reverb or anything else, we had a tape and console emulation. These are the 2 building blocks or the 2 foundation pieces that you need before you start getting into compressors and EQs and saturators and all the other bells and whistles we're going to throw on over the next several weeks. This starts us off with something that already sounds really good. Right now, and again, that assumes for a second that you have a track in its raw form that's recorded well, which we do. Okay, that goes without saying. But if you have that, these 2 plugins and console emulation being tonight, it really enhances things a lot. Okay, and you have lots of different flavors here, depending on what you're going for. Will depend on what you choose. Okay. So again, if you want to learn more about these kinds of plugins and really even go deeper than where we went today, I think Dave's already put it in the chat. Check out Mixing with Analog Style Plugins Made Easy. That course, if you use these kinds of plugins, I don't care if they're Slate Digitals, Fab Filters, Waves, SSL, Plugin Alliance, Universal Audio, Arturi, whatever, however you pronounce Arturi, whoever. I don't care what third-party plugin you use. If it emulates these old analog equipment, you should own that course. If you don't fully understand some of the things that we're talking about tonight, or if some of this stuff is new because you're new to it, and again, totally cool. We were all new once. It is the only training thing I've ever seen on the market that shows you how to use these things in the most effective way and explains the different levels of compression and everything I'm talking about tonight, but much more in depth. Check out that course because you could get it at 50% off. It's like 14 or 15 hours long. Okay. And in that course, you're going to get audio files. We're going to mix a song together from start to finish, the whole thing. It's a long course. It's meant to take weeks to go through. Not a day. It's meant to take a long time to slowly go through it. And you'll understand these things because once you start to understand and think about these things in this way, your mixes are just going to naturally come together better. They just are because you're going to use these plugins in the most effective way. Okay. So I hope that opens up some of your eyes, or if you're even someone who uses console emulation before but didn't think about some of the things that I said tonight. Hopefully that's helped you in some way. Let's head back on over to the chat and I'll answer any questions that you guys have, and I'll try to help you in any way that I can. So I hope you found that helpful to you. Okay, let's see. We still got 50 or so people here, which is great. If you've asked a question sometime during that demonstration, I didn't see it. If Dave hasn't helped you already and you want me to answer a question, certainly type it in and I will be happy to help. Okay. All right. Well, I could scroll back up a little bit here while you guys are typing away and just see if anything's here. Okay, Mark asks a good question. Says, how much is the volume adding to that EQ shift? 2, 3, maybe 2 dB, 3 dB, maybe at most. I didn't put it on a meter and looked, but that's what it sounds like. Couple of dB for sure, for sure. And that's not a bad thing, by the way. Okay, also remember when we talk about, where you start a mix, and you could go watch the gain staging video on the YouTube channel. When we start a mix, our master bus is going to be hitting, before we've done any processing, around a -12, -10 dB. That's kind of how I teach you to gain stage. By the time you're done with the end of the mix, you're going to raise that mix in volume about 4 to 6 dB, and you're going to end up at around a -6 or so before mastering. So you are going to add some volume to the mix. You are going to, especially when you start putting compressors and reverb, you're going to add, it's going to happen. It's never going to be, at least I shouldn't say never, but it's rarely that it's going to be when you're all done with the mixing, you got 75 plugins in on your mix, that if you turn them all on and turn them all off, you don't hear some volume difference. You're going to a little bit. And like I said, most of that isn't really that the fader is louder. It's the EQ shift that's happening. Okay. So you just want to keep that in mind, and you don't want to get crazy, as you go through each level or each plugin. As I said, when you turn them on and off, they should be relatively the same volume, as close as you can get, which we could even have gotten closer here, but I wanted to do things in a relatively quick manner. Let's see. Great song. Wood Beast, what's going on, man? Ian says, on subject of console emulations, would love to have a recommendation for Waves. The NLS by Waves is the only one they have. They're non-linear summing, which is very similar to the VCC in the way it works. They have a two-part plugin, one you put on the buses, one you put on the channel. They only model 3 consoles in that particular one, where in the Slate you get 6, but that's the one you would want if you want the Waves equivalent. Hope that, and you could get that for probably $25 today because everything's on sale. Okay, let's see. Jimmy says, well, louder is better, says the guitarist. That's right. Robbie says, I just picked up the course. Oh, great. Good. Congratulations. Enjoy the course. Let me know how you like it. Oh, yeah, Dave's already answered about the linear summing. Good, he's ahead of me. Would-Be's excellent show, Dave. Thank you so much, brother. I hope it was helpful. Let's see. Remote Post. Hey, Remote Post, how are you? Do you think UA and the Plugin Alliance will sound better than Logic Pro default plugins? I don't use Logic Pro in their default plugins, but yes, the answer is yes. I have yet to hear a stock plugins in any DAW that competes with Universal Audio, Plugin Alliance, Slate Digital. They're different. And it's not that they're better, they're just different. Stock plug, unless there's a special plugin, like for example, in Studio One, they have the Fat Channel and they have some third-party plugin emulations. They emulate a Pultec, they emulate 1176. It's part of their stock plugin package. Some DAWs have that. Most of them don't. I don't know if Logic does. And then it becomes a question of, well, do you like those versus going out and buying a third-party one? But a typical standard old compressor or an EQ is going to be very transparent. It's not going to add that color and that thing that we're listening to tonight. It's just not. That's not what stock plugins are designed for. That's what these plugins are designed for. But in Logic Pro specifically, I don't know for sure because I don't use Logic Pro. But unless they have specific plugins that are made to emulate these old pieces of gear, I would say some of these other plugins are going to just sound better to my ear. That's my opinion. Let's see. Stanley asked about Waves. Yes, nonlinear summing. Stanley, Dave's already answered that in the chat as well. Let's see. Mark says, do you put a limiter on your master bus or wait till mastering? Typically if it's only one song, typically on the master bus. And that's a whole nother, we'll talk about mastering several weeks from now. But typically when I'm done mixing a single track, I don't go master it, quote unquote. The mix is the master because I'll put a limiter on the master bus. But not everybody does that. That's just the way I work. Let's see. Woodby says, Dave, 3D mixing course. Can we hear a demo? 3D mixing course would be if you're talking. I don't have a course specifically on 3D, but if you want to talk about that kind of technique, that's a Mixing Made Easy Volume 2 Advanced. There is no, I don't have a demo of it. It's just in that course, if that's what you're asking. That's where I talk about the 3D sound field and some of these things, and it's a little bit more of an advanced course. That's in Mixing Made Easy Volume 2. Tom says, what if you use a preamp to get more drive on specific channels? Yeah, you could do that too, Tom. I think we didn't talk about here. Well, yes. Yeah, the answer is yes, you can. I know because again, we these are all guidelines. These are no hard, fast rules. But remember that the console emulation of this particular plugin is really emulating the preamp section of the console, right? But that's not to say you couldn't add, in our case, let's say a Neve 1073 before the console collection. Sure, you could if you wanted to. You could do that. If you wanted some more color, yeah, you can. That's the great thing about the plugin world is you can mix and match some of this stuff and you can come up with your own unique tones. Whereas if you just had regular hardware, you have what the hardware sounds like and that's it. You don't have any opportunities to have variety, which you do. But the answer to your question is absolutely you could do that. You could do it on just a specific set of channels. You could do it on every channel if you wanted to. Let's see. Let's see, any other questions? Awesome. Classes, Dave, I really could hear the difference. Awesome. If you can hear the difference, and that's great. And that means your ear's starting to get tuned into this stuff. Stanley says, is the slate tape better than the overloud tape desk? Better, it's different. I have reviews on the overloud tape desk on the YouTube channel. You can check that out. I talked a little bit about that the other night. The overloud tape desk has some additional features that the slate tape machine doesn't have. It's a wonderful tape machine. It is unique and different. I tend to use the virtual tape machine more myself because I'm just used to the way it sounds. But the overloud's a great one as well. But they sound completely different, totally different from each other. Ian asked, did everyone check out the free plugin from Waves, the Echo Sphere? Yeah, I downloaded it and played with it a little bit. It sounds pretty good. It's what little I tested it out. It's like, yeah, this is okay. It's not bad. Yeah, it's great. If for free, it's wonderful. And I'll do a video on it and it'll be on the YouTube channel, sometime next week. But yeah, that's a great plugin and they gave it away for free. Let's see. By far your courses are cuts above everything out there. So much detail. You can explain exactly what and why you are doing to accomplish the point. Thank you, man. That sticks. Thank you so much. I appreciate the compliment. Yeah, thank you. I'm glad that the courses are helping. The courses, it's all the Made Easy series courses especially, are the reason why they're long courses and the reason why they're 12 and 15 hours long in some cases is because in order to go into the level of detail that I need to go into to get you to understand what I want you to understand, it takes a lot of time. Plus, I teach a lot of those courses from a more beginner's perspective, so there is some repetitiveness in some of the points by design, right? To really make sure when you walk away that you really understand what's going on. I've taken lots of training courses, long before I was making courses. I was just like you. I was buying courses from people from time to time as part of my learning. Courses weren't as popular as they are today as far as wasn't as many people making them. But the one thing that I found when doing my homework before I started, putting together training courses was that most of the courses were no more than an hour and a half to 2 hours long, usually, most of them. And they were more real top level view stuff. So in other words, you never really got into the why. You got into what someone did, right? No matter what the topic was. And yeah, you get a little bit of an explanation on certain concepts, but you never really walked away and understood, well, why do you do that? What's, why this and why that? Those questions are typically never asked or never answered in those kinds of courses. And the reason for that is because it takes time to be able to put all that information together so you really get a full featured training course. And so That was my goal when I first started putting together these courses for you guys, was I wanted them to be fully featured. It's not a 90-minute course. You're not going to learn the craft of mixing to be a professional sounding mixer, whether you want to do a professional or not. You want yourself to sound professional. You're not going to learn that in 90 minutes. You're just not. And you're not going to learn it in a 10-minute YouTube video. If you don't have the patience to sit through this stuff and to really understand it, then your mixes will always sound like a cheap demo. And that's not to be mean or anything. That's just reality, right? So my courses are designed so when you walk away from those things, you have an enormous amount of information. The courses are also designed for you to go through them multiple times over the course of months, right? It's not a quick thing. It takes time. It's like a semester of college, some of these courses, right? And so I'm glad that you really, you found them helpful to you, because that's my goal, and I just don't think you find that in anyone else's courses. That doesn't mean other people don't put out great stuff. They do, but they don't go into the level of detail that I go into. They just don't. And so I'm glad it's helped you, but thank you for saying that. Let's see. Great lessons, Dave. Thanks. You're welcome, Ken. Thank you, my buddy. Thanks, Dave. Thank you, Woodbeast. Still got 40 people here. This is cool. Could you use the Waves, Mark's asking, could you use the Waves SSL on tracks and then an SSL on the master bus for similar to the NSL tonight? Not tonight, I can't do that. but what you're asking technically could be done. If we do a second one of these, this series is still going to be 4 or 5 weeks more. At the end of that, again, if the turnout is good and we get lots of, people interested, we'll do another one of these from the ground up, and I'll use a different set of plugins. I won't use the same ones, and I'll show you the differences. But that's not something I can't do tonight. Let's see. Ian says, I don't know if I said this before, but I'm definitely saving up for a set of Kali LP6s for my first speakers. Yeah, Kalis make good stuff, I've understood. The fact that it's only $149 for a pair is a great price. I've heard that in that price bracket, the Kalis are the best ones out there. Now, I've never used them personally, but I know people that do, and they've said the same thing to me, that for $150, you almost can't believe it's a $150 speaker. That's wonderful. So yeah, you're again, buy them from somewhere that if you don't like them, you can return them. That would be my only thing, is if you can check them out and you may love them, but if you don't, you want to be able to exchange them. Jimmy Farmer says he has them and they're great. See those? So there you go. Thanks, David. You're welcome, Tom. Okay. Woodbeast, Dave, when Studio loads is fast for you, even with plugins? Oh, are you asking when does Studio One load fast with plugins? For me, it does. Yeah. If that's your question. Let's see. Any other questions? I enjoy watching the shows here. Awesome. I'm glad that you're here. In your opinion, are the fat channel plugins from Studio One on par with UAD, Plugin Alliance, Slate, etc.? And what is your opinion about the newest rehaul of Studio One stock plugins? Okay. The last question I'll answer first. It's the same. They're the same plugins. They just look different. I like the way they look. Are they any better than the original plugins? I don't think so. If you're talking about just the standard reverb, standard compressors, standard EQ, no. The Pro EQ in the newest overhaul is exactly the same as the first one from a sound point of view, in my opinion, but they look better. They overhauled the look of them, and they look great, I think. Are the fat channel plugins in Studio One on par? Are they on par with UAD and Plugin Alliance? No. Not in my opinion. I think they sound great. I have demos of them all on the YouTube channel. There's even some videos where and I forget when, this is probably going back a year or so, where we actually compared. For example, I remember comparing the 1176 by UAD to the 1176 in Studio One to the 1176 of Waves, and we did them live in a live stream, and there was differences. I think the one in Studio One stacks up pretty nicely. Do I think they're as good as the other ones? No. And again, I'm not knocking anyone that uses them. I think that 1176 in Studio One is better than using their regular old compressor in Studio One, which adds no color, no vibe, no nothing. The 1176 adds a little bit, and it's a little bit better. But I personally don't use the fat channel plugins because I have so many of the other ones. You know what I mean? If I had to choose, no. But they come, like the 1176 comes free with Studio One, so there's nothing to buy. The same thing with the Pultec. We shot out the Pultec Studio One to the Pultec by Universal Audio to the Pultec by Waves, and the Universal Audio one, if I remember right, was better. The Studio One was third on the list. They were close. It's great that Studio One added a Pultec. It sounds a little like a Pultec. Definitely better than using the regular old Pro EQ, I think. But if I had to choose, and it wasn't about the budget or the money, I said, which one would I buy? It wouldn't be the one in Studio One. I would buy one of the other ones. So, but I think they're close. They're just not, they're not quite there. They're not, you know what I mean? And that's just my honest opinion. You know, I'm just telling you honestly. Where, you know, you're going to go to some other channel, they're going to tell you, oh, it's exactly this, you know. You go to anyone else that teaches Studio One stuff, and they're going to tell you that those fat channels are as good as anything else out there, because they all work for PreSonus and they have to push that. I don't work for PreSonus, and I'm telling you that they don't sound as good. They sound good, but there is no way their fat channel plugin sounds as good as Universal Audio plugins. They do not, in my opinion. But again, sound is subjective, right? You may love them, and if you love them, you should use them. They're not bad plugins, but they're not the same. Okay. Hope I answered your question. I know I answered your question, but hopefully I gave you enough information there. Okay, Mark says, also, I've been spending a lot of time on your compression and EQ courses over each one multiple times. Oh, great. Those are very popular. They were just redone, as you know, in 2020. Those have been completely redone and completely overhauled from the original courses from 6 years ago. If you're someone that, you know, needs EQ and compression training, again, those things are specifically designed for that. And this time around, as you know, Mark, you have all the audio files with those courses, so we're working on the same piece of music together, and you can turn the knobs the way I'm turning the knobs, where the first courses didn't have that. So those are great courses. I'm glad you've gone through them multiple times, especially the compression one. And by the way, anyone that's new to mixing, those are the first two courses I tell them to buy: EQ compression and then Mixing Made Easy Volume 1. Before you do anything else, you have to have a handle on EQ and compression. Those are the two most important tools in a mixer's toolkit. Without a good understanding of both of those things, everything else after that is icing on the cake. So that's great, and I'm glad the courses are helping you. Let's see. Okay, someone's talking about the Neve console emulation, and the Overloud tape desk is fantastic. Yep, it's a really good tape machine. Juan says, I ordered a iMac 27-inch 6-core yesterday. Wonderful. Congratulations, man. Merry Christmas to you. I'll upgrade the memory myself. What Apple charges for a simple upgrade is flat out nuts. It is. You are absolutely correct. A 2.5 terabyte external storage is ready to go. This will be my studio only setup. That's a wonderful computer you bought. Yes, with the iMacs, I would tell you upgrade your memory yourself, because you'll pay 4 times the cost using Apple memory, which is insane. And you have a 2.5 terabyte storage. You got plenty, man. That's a wonderful studio setup. Congratulations. Let's see. The courses are great. I've got them all. Awesome. Great, man. Thank you. Robbie says he just got I just got volume 2. Great. Volume 2 is really great. If you're ready for that, and again, that's a more advanced course. That's not a beginner's course. So that's awesome. But there's a lot of concepts and techniques in that course that nobody talks about. No one. Especially early reflections. You'll enjoy that section. Let's see. Ian says, I love that you switched from the Shure SM7B to the PreSonus mic. Yeah, look at it right here, right? I love how the PreSonus mic sounds. Probably will use it in vocals. Yeah, I was very surprised, and I did a shootout of the SM7B versus this, and to me, I don't know, it just sounds really darn close to an SM7B, and it's 1/5 the price. So they made a great microphone here. See, so I tell you, if I don't like something by PreSonus, I'll tell you that I don't like their plugins, but this microphone's fantastic. So fair and balanced, as they say. That's what I try to be, fair and balanced. Oh yeah, Mark says you didn't mean comparing the NLS tonight, but in the future. Yeah, we will. I understand, Mark. I hear you. Use the Sweetwater link for gear, right? Gear, plugins, anything. Yeah, anything that they sell. That link will work on anything that you buy on the website. So the link that Dave's putting up there will bring you right to the homepage of Sweetwater. And then once you're on the homepage, it kind of knows that it's my link. And then anywhere you go on that website, anything you buy, a pack of guitar strings, or if you buy a $10,000 drum set, it'll all go under that link. So if you want to buy a $10,000 drum set, that would be awesome. Let's see. Remote Post says headphones of studio monitors. I bet you probably meant headphones or studio monitors. As far as the lowest cost and highest quality, headphones. Talked about that. There's a YouTube video I have called, I don't know, what is it called? The 4 or 5 pro tips to mixing on headphones, something to that effect, where I talk about that. But if you have it depends on your budget. If you're going to get more bang for the buck with a really great set of headphones than you will a really cheap set of monitors. I've talked about that many, many times. And if you go watch the video and lay it all out and explain why, the pros, the cons, this, that, you'll see the whole thing. Let's see. What is your go-to? Ian says, what's your go-to or from a template of reverb and delays in your mixing workflow? Well, you're just going to have to come back for the reverb and delay section. But there is a YouTube video that I've done on that called, what's it called? Professional sounding vocals with reverb and delay or something like that, where I show it to you. But I'm going to show it to you probably 3 or 4 weeks from now. Let's see. Juan says, I will be purchasing EQ and compression courses this coming year. Awesome. Slowly getting my studio set up and going, mostly to record my own instrumental stuff. Moving on to bands as my studio grows. Good for you, man. Good luck with it. Congratulations. That's awesome. That's awesome. DJ says, hey, DJ, I bought all the courses that Dave and David S.J. suggested. Oh, so I'll be having fun binge watching the EQ and compression courses first after hearing Dave's comments tonight to reply to another question. Cool, man. Awesome. Thank you for buying all the courses, by the way. What was the other question, Dave, that you had? Do you have another question? I'm sorry if you do. Type it in. I don't want to not answer your question. Let's see. Mixing. Okay, Dave's putting all the things in the chat. Dave's got more stuff in the chat. Okay, cool. I think I'm at the end of the chat room. Okay, so if there's any more questions, now's the time to ask. We will do another one of these probably next week. Again, make sure you are subscribed on my email list. Go to Home Recording Made Easy. Click the orange button at the top of the homepage. You're going to get a free mixing course when you sign up. Sign up doesn't cost you anything. Get a free course, but you'll be notified. All the deals, all the specials that are going on, when I'm going to be live on YouTube, all that stuff, you won't be notified if you're not on the email list. So get on the email list. Let's see. Can we get one of those shirts? These? Yeah, I think you can. You're right on my YouTube channel. You could buy one. I think you can. Yeah. Yep. Absolutely. Okay, so do we have any more questions? If not, we've been on here about 90 minutes. Again, I want to thank everybody so much again for turning out tonight. I hope you found this helpful. Next week, we'll talk about channel strips. And we will go through a deep dive on a specific channel strip. And again, how does that pair up? And how does that work with tape machines in the console? That's going to be next week. So make sure you're back here for next week. And is that it? Yeah, no more questions? Going once, going twice. Mark says, also, is the podcast still a thing? Yeah, I mean, I took a break. I did 19 episodes. We'll probably do more in 2021. I won't be doing any more this year. If you have any podcast show suggestions, you can email them to me. But yeah, I think we'll do more. We'll do some more podcast stuff. But right now there's 19 episodes up there. So hopefully you've listened to all of those. And until next week, I will see everybody. Have a great rest of your weekend. Stay safe, and I will talk to everyone next week. See you, everybody.